Here's the scenario. You're lost in the woods or you're injured in the woods. You can't get out. You're now in a survival situation. What's the most important tool for you to have? A big, beefy survival knife. Good item, but nope, not the most important tool. Some really solid paracord. Again, good item, but nope, not the most important tool. A strong, sturdy tarp like this for making a shelter? Nope. Something to make fire like a big lighter or a huge fire steel. Again, good items, but not the tool I'm talking about. All right, guys, Tim here from Everyday Tactical Vids, and I'm going to tell you about the tool that is most important if you're in a survival situation, and I want you to hear me out because I'm going to actually show you a technique that can help save your life. The most important tool, it's right here. In a survival situation, if you get injured, if you get lost, one of the most dangerous things that happens is not the immediate threat, but it's where your mind goes to what might happen in the future, and then you can just go downhill from there. Do you know what happens often when hunters get lost in the woods? When they get lost in the woods, they start moving more quickly. They start running. I'm sure the truck is just over that hill. I'm sure the parking lot is just over that embankment. And then they start moving more quickly. Then they fall and get injured, or they get more lost. That happens on a regular basis if you look into stories of people getting lost in the woods. Now, Tim, I know you're saying mindset or your brain is really important, but what if I'm physically injured? No, that's a great point. If you're physically injured, you got to deal with that physical injury. But again, if you are in a panicked mindset and you are freaking out, you may not even have the wherewithal to address your physical injury. So what I want to do is teach you about something called the physiological sigh. And I've picked this up from two different great teachers. So one guy, his name is Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He's the originator of the sheepdog concept, that there are sheep and there are wolves, and we're called as people in this world who want to engage in survival preparedness, caring for fellow citizens. We're called to be sheepdogs, not just to be a sheep, not to be a wolf certainly, but to be a sheepdog who helps protect the sheep. So Grossman talks about a version of the physiological sigh. The other person who talks about this idea is Andrew Huberman, and he is a professor at Stanford University, and he is a neuroscientist. Now, the thing I like about this is you have a guy who's very much kind of on the tactical and practical side of things, but thinks philosophically. And then you have a guy who thinks philosophically, but is a neuroscientist. So put those two worlds together, and two guys saying the same thing with overlap, but also differences in their approach, that should tell us something. So Huberman addresses this in a variety of different videos and teachings. I put a link at the end of this video to a 4-minute video that he is on the Tim Ferriss show. If you're familiar with Tim Ferriss, kind of a leader and a thought leader and leadership guru type of guy. So he talks about the physiological sigh. So here's what I want to tell you about the physiological sigh. What it does is it gets you out of the stress mode and back into the thinking mode. And here's how it works. So you may be familiar with the idea of box breathing, right? So big inhale in, you hold it. Big inhale out, you hold it, right? So kind of maybe 3 seconds in or 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and repeat that cycle. And that's supposed to calm you down when you're stressed. So I want you to imagine you're in a survival situation. All of a sudden you're like, yo, I'm lost in the woods. This is a bad situation for me. Your brain starts freaking out. You have a moment of going, I got to calm myself down, but you don't know how to do it. So the physiological sigh will help in doing that. So let me address it from the Huberman side of things that he's taught in a variety of different settings. So here's what he talks about, right? So when you are stressed, your heart rate is up, you've got more CO2 that's building up in your body, and you need to get the CO2 out, and you need to drop your heart rate, right? When people are like freaking out and you say to them, calm down, calm down, calm down, what do we often say? We often say, breathe. But it's not just any breath, it's a particular way we breathe. Huberman notes that if you watch like your dog will be sleeping there, and then we'll do this little kind of breath, or it's not a yawn, it's more like just kind of an exhale, but they'll go. And that's an example of the physiological sigh. Humans do this even in our sleep, is that we'll do this kind of double breath in and then exhale to get rid of more of our CO2. Here's what goes on. When we get into a stressed situation, our brain shifts into the part of the brain which is moving right into fight or flight. I got to react, I got to respond, I got to react. And that thinking part of our brain gets shut down. Not completely, but it's less activated. And so we need to move ourselves from the stress brain to the thinking brain, all right? So the physiological sigh is to get rid of CO2 and to slow our heart rate down. And the way you do it is a full breath in, a little extra breath, and then an extremely long exhale. Huberman notes that if you think about your lungs as these tiny little sacs, he says if you took them and laid them out flat, it would be as big as, I think he said, as a tennis court, right? So huge amount of space. And when we get stressed, those sacs start to get smaller and smaller, and they're filled with CO2. It's just not a good situation, right? So what you want to do is take an inhale in, an extra little inhale, and then a full breath out. What that does is it gathers up the CO2 and pushes it out. And beyond that, it does something in your actual diaphragm. All right, so I've readjusted the camera to show you actually my chest area so you can understand how this works. When you're stressed and you're breathing quickly, when you're inhaling a lot and not exhaling out, it actually expands this whole area, right? Your diaphragm is going to be filling up. And because it's filling up, your heart is going to say, I need to beat faster to get more blood to that whole area. On the other side, when you exhale and fully push out your diaphragm, you can kind of feel yourself go like this, and this whole chest area starts to kind of shrink in size. Now, obviously, you're not transforming your body, but the area that's going to be used in the process of breathing shrinks, and your heart says, okay, less space, I don't have to work as hard, and so it'll start slowing your heart rate down. All right, so check this out. This is what it looks like, right? I'm gonna do an inhale, extra inhale, and then push out. I want you to see how far I push out, okay? Ready? As far as I can push. Now, Huberman notes in actual studies, this is not just like, some random guru who's like, this should work for you. Like, no, actual scientific studies, they have found that this is one of the best ways to reduce stress in the moment. He notes that you can go to breathing classes and all types of kind of long-term solutions, which is great. But in the moment, this can actually physically shape or change your body and what's going on in your system to push you back into a place where you're more calm. So again, double inhale, preferably through the nose, and then exhale out through the mouth. So and when you can hear, as you get to the end of it, you're kind of like, oh, I'm pushing this air so hard, but it's going to drop your heart rate, and it's going to help your brain shift from that stress response to the thinking response. I have done this in stressful situations. I went through a season in life where I was dealing with so much stress from a ton of different things. And I was actually in a car wash with my kids. And all of a sudden, boom, I just like clicked into stress mode, and I started to feel claustrophobic. Now I'm literally like looking at the door saying, do I have to get out in the car wash, soaking wet, and try to run out of this thing? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, what is happening to me? And it's because all this stress was kind of compiling, and I wasn't dealing with it. And in that moment, because I had watched Huberman's video, my daughter was with me. She was like, are you okay? I was like, shh, just be quiet, please, just be quiet. And I worked on the breathing, and that breathing exercise got me back to a calm place where I could get out and I could move on with my day. Now, longer term, I had to deal with the stress of what was going on in my life, but in that moment, it got me back to the thinking part of my brain, calmed me down, dropped my heart rate, and I was able to continue on with the rest of the day, to the point that it was the day after Christmas, and my kids had little Christmas money. They wanted to go to the mall, and so I was able to continue on with that trip. So I want to tell you, this works in real life. I have tried it. Now, let me go back to Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman talks about this whole breathing exercise as well. And he gives examples of, like, he's taught this to soldiers who have come back from being in war, and they're struggling with PTSD, they're struggling with memories. And so when they start to move into that mental space, he'll encourage them to breathe. One of the things he started to encourage them to do is to take a big sip of water, because it naturally forces you to take a breath in, to hold it, and then when you get done and swallow, then you exhale, and it's basically doing the same thing. Grossman tells the story of a guy who he taught this technique to, the take a sip, take the deep breath in and push out. He talks about a story that a guy was driving his truck, flipped his truck in an accident, worked through the breathing exercises. By the time the rescue people got there to help him and he was okay, he was still buckled in. He was listening to the radio. He had calmed himself down so much that he was able to do that. Now, let's take this back to survival, right? If you are in a survival situation, your brain is freaking out and you're like, okay, I'm gonna start running. Okay, no, you gotta take a deep breath, slow down, get back into the thinking part of your brain, and then go, okay, what's the next step for me? So that's why I say the best tool for you to have when you're in a survival situation is your brain. And it's a clear thinking brain. It's not just, okay, everybody's got a brains, but I'm still freaking out. Like, no. If you got a brain, you got to have a brain that's working well and functioning well. And this physiological sigh will help you to get back to that place. I want to encourage you to practice it a little bit on your own and do it every once in a while. And hopefully you'll get to the point where if you were ever in a stressful situation, whether it's survival in the woods or just in real life, you can think, all right, physiological sigh, I'm going to do that 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and that'll start dropping my stress and getting me back into a right mindset so I can effectively address the situation. Everyday Tactical Vids, survive and thrive. This technique of the physiological sigh can help you to survive. It can also help you to thrive. Thanks for checking out this video. More videos coming soon. All right, guys. See you later.